Hello, this is Branko Malic of Tribune with a new podcast that will treat a subject we rarely treat, that is very popular. To say it almost ironically that something like this can be popular subject of discussion, namely the subject of abortion. The reason for this is the current resolution of referenda to repeal a certain principles from the Constitution of the Republic of Ireland that legally ban abortion, something that happened just a day ago, and kind of, as I can observe, send ripples throughout the world, quite deservedly, because this was a landslide victory for pro-abortion advocates, a landslide in a way that is markedly significant, because it was such a absolute victory, namely by the exit polls I checked out yesterday. It was 67% in favor of repealing the amendments that ban abortion in Ireland. This is something that is really showing the sentiment of Irish public, and this sentiment is hugely in favor of abortion. Of course, you always have those people that try to get into finer details of the matter, namely that this is not really about legalizing abortion, but just amending constitution that abortion can be discussed. But anybody with an ounce of brains knows what this means. I won't talk here about the predicament of Irish, of legal system, even of nature of abortion itself. I rarely wrote or spoke about it because it comes, because many others did, and because it comes in package with other things as gay marriages, euthanasia, and similar, that I did speak and write about. But now, what I want to speak about now is something that followed this referendum victory, and something that was, quite honestly, sickening. It was elation, the mood of celebration among the people that is observable in Ireland. And this is probably, at least to my mind, the most devastating result of the affair. Because I can understand that somebody can be argued into accepting abortion, or being at least willing to discuss about moral justification of abortion. But to be elated about possibility of legally having abortion, of celebrating it, is something that blows the mind of the old-fashioned guy. I believe in the future there will be nothing mind-blowing about it. There was a previous podcast we did on Tribune. It was called on Unholy Indifference, claiming that indifference is a cardinal sin, to speak in somewhat religious term, or proton pseudos, the first mistake of modern or postmodern man. And now we see elation about indifference. How indifference slowly mutates in something quite different than indifference. Some very peculiar emotion of celebrating things that are, quite honestly, repulsive. Not morally, let's not talk about the morals of it now, or pros and contras of the possibility to abort a newborn child. Let's talk about what what we celebrate, what people celebrate, and with this elation in quite corporeal fashion. They are celebrating the scrapping of the living being, still undeveloped, but quite living, from the mother's womb. This act is physically disgusting. For women, who is, I even cannot understand this from the perspective of women, from the simple fact that I don't have an organs to imagine the invasionary and violent nature of this act, of a violation that it represents, violations of most intimate bodily aspect of woman, most vulnerable, what makes her, in a bodily sense, of course, in a purely physical sense, a woman, but it of course reflects on the mentality and on, let's say, anthropological, ontological structure of what we call woman. And this is the purest violation of it. Let's leave aside the morals of it, any value judgments, just observe it. Gruesomeness of it. So this is the elation and celebration of the first step towards the legalization of gruesomeness. And now you probably know, everybody following Kali Tribune is more or less in the know about these discussions, be it abortion, euthanasia, you name it. There is always kind of set of arguments pro and contra. And in abortion case, as in all other cases, it's always pros, always muddling the waters with a systemic logic of, if one instance is good, then all instances must be good. But it boils down to it. So they want to put forward the argument that there are cases when a woman's life is in danger and abortion has to be done to save it. These cases are very rare, and abortion campaigning, pro-abortion campaigning, was never about this. And the very fact that those people put forward such arguments that I would accept probably, and some doctor would accept with a heavy heart, but in a situation where he has to choose, would probably have to make this choice. It was never about that, and everybody knows this. But it is only a weapon to stall the discussion, to keep the discussion in limbo, because abortion is justified precisely by being in a moral limbo, in being able to keep people in a state of indifference. This is the alpha and omega of abortion as an act, its moral value. It can keep you in the limbo of indifference, because it is not a straightforward murder, yet it is a murder. And you can never be sure. But what is important here is that abortion is mainly a mean to put down of misery some of the peoples that are considered to be unfit to live. This was the main reason why abortionist campaigns began in the late 19th, early 20th century, and I think that it is the fact now. The targeted potential people are children with Down syndrome, and I know people who have love and raise people with Down syndrome, and anybody who wants to abort a baby because he or she will have low quality of life. Being with Down syndrome is, in my mind, a criminal, terminal criminal. And I do think that among these huge percent of people who voted pro-abortion, a good chunk, an even greater percentage, are this kind of criminals. They will never see themselves as such, they will never be deemed as such, they will never be judged by such, but they are such. I will not say in the eyes of God, it's kind of truism, but somewhere deep inside, I think they know it too. And they are celebrating it. And this is disgusting. It is disgusting in a very peculiar manner because it is so unassuming. The celebratory mood is so undramatic that nausea it induces in you is not really a revolt or a gag reflex, but more like slow but persistent feeling that you have to puke, but you cannot puke, which is the worst thing when you're drunk or something, believe me. Something that I would like to erase from my consciousness as soon as possible, but unfortunately I can't. I'm not Irish and I don't really participate in it, but this is the world, a world encompassing drive to bring this kind of identity and biopolitics not only in the mainstream but make it a ruling system, and it will succeed to an extent. It already had succeeded in a lot of things that most of us even don't see, but I think it will eventually fail, and it is already failing, but its failure won't be something to celebrate because it will be costly, and we will pay dearly for this, all of us, no matter how correctly we stood against this. We'll all pay. Let us not make no mistakes about it. One thing that will, I think, happen is burgeoning of right-wing politics. I mean, right-wing will skyrocket. And I know that I just talked to my friend who is in university waters in academia and telling me he's intelligent and upright man. He's no fascist, but as most of people who are aware of the problems, he says that there are times when he could really use a fascist government to repel these things. And there are a lot of such people, and they are biding their time. The only thing one can pray for is that those who are rational and those who are upright will prevail, but this is not something I would bet on. The thing that will happen is that these things will have to be reverted somehow. There will come a predicament, a situation of impasse where the problems, the ills that will be caused by things like this referendum will have to be reversed, and this reversal will be violent because once these things became a matter of celebration for common people and not for some elite of eugenicists or Bertrand Russells and such, the things went, as people in Ireland say, beyond the pale. This is the blame is on people. The blame is on us. I hate this pronoun, but in these cases, us becomes the moral subject, and us will have to give account to what they did. It is very easy, for instance, for these Eastern European and immigrants from other countries who come to a country like Ireland to be elated by a lot of things, by prosperity, by accepting nature of people, by possibility to make it in life, which is sometimes well nigh impossible further east. But most of them don't see the other side. They see one side of the coin and ignore or just don't see the other side. The reason for this is putting for a moment aside their relation with their new country of residence, is their stupidity. And their stupidity is a peculiar form of worse stupidity, because it is not actually stupidity. They are not stupid. They are stupid only insofar as their intelligence is built upon contrast to the stupidity of others. They measure their intelligence by the standard of other people's stupidity, and this makes them, in the long run, only in the long run, this makes them sniveling idiots. And this is how they end up. This is going halfway in thinking, going to understand, for instance, ills of Croatia, of stubbornness, of backwardness, of violence, of crookedness, of realizing that you cannot allow to be screwed one time too many. And you realize this, and then you don't realize the other side. You don't realize, for instance, this stubbornness and violence, for instance, about some historical questions, endless discussions, endless polemics, debates, physical fights, you name it, ability to start a war because you don't like the name of other country and so on, things that seem ridiculous in the West. This means, first and foremost, that people are not indifferent on the most basic level, and you wish that they are indifferent when you live there. Oh, how you wish this. But it's better than being indifferent. And the people who are elated by legalizing abortion in their own country, those people went beyond indifference to something new, to a peculiar emotion and peculiar ontological mood, I could even say, of finding in their indifference a hidden root of it, and this hidden root is evil, and they are reveling in evil. Abortion is a deed of evil. One can argue that there are cases that it is necessary evil. One can argue, I am not really so sure that he can argue it to a positive conclusion, but I allow for the possibility. But the very act, stripped of anything but what it is pure gruesomeness, especially in the eyes of women. And I don't need myself to be a woman to understand this, because this is very logical when you see what the deed is. They are fucking elated by it. And this is your unholy indifference. Indifference that is based upon a lie, that indifference protects you from moral choice. This kind of indifference makes you choose the worse. And by being indifferent, moving to another stage of being elatedly indifferent makes you one step, or maybe even more, already in hell, in my opinion. And no Google, no Intel, no fucking JP Morgan, no world multinational that will settle in your country and employ your people will help you to alleviate this. The hard question is, of course, then how to go about in this world where you have a choice, basically, when you are faced with the choice of living in a corrupted dump where people are, okay, not so corrupted in their intimate minds, in their private lives, they are not ideologized in this manner, or living in the West where the politics that is carried by multinationals but is has far deeper roots, is the call where you have to accept it, because you cannot have let's face it, you can have Facebook, Google, Intel and company providing you with good stuff in your country if you don't make some concessions that are not only political but moral and religious, and they are implied. Those concessions are implied. The same goes for the system of European Union. I have no answer to this as of yet. I have it for myself, but I myself am not important in this podcast. I am important to myself and a few other people. I will say what I mean to give some positive, let's say, outlines of solutions when I have them, and I do believe they exist, and I do believe that there is a high time to start trying to practically devise them. Although, as all of you know, outsiders can think fabulously, but they can do very little. The only thing to turn this about is through practically infiltrating academia, as it was done by these guys decades ago. Academia, by going into politics with the aim to win, not to tell the truth, but to win, which is very problematic for instance, for somebody like me, and would probably not be able to pull it off, or in economy to kind of like sway things in another direction. It is doable. I think it will be done, but the question is who will do it and how it will be done. And I don't think, because things will by inertia go in this opposite direction, but everything coming from inertia tends to blend the opposite, so you can get something far worse only coming from the right-wing side. This is nothing to be surprised about. But I can tell you one thing. For instance, I would not consider very much a right-wing decision that when in Ireland, which prohibits abortion, somebody goes to England to perform an abortion, to prevent that person from returning to Ireland is completely in the boundaries of the law. That is my way of thinking. Just to give you an image of who you're dealing with here. And this is not that would be considered right wing 30 years ago. This was 40 maybe years ago. But this is a pretty logical application of law, because abortion is a criminal thing. It is an evil thing. There are maybe cases when it is necessary, but those are not most of the cases that ever was, even in the 19th and 20th century, early 20th century. It's a pro-abortionist lie. They don't care about saving women from backstreet abortion. They care about destroying the family and letting the state or corporation, or the same, because corporate state is the name of the day, enter the primary unit of human communal living and destroy it. That's what they want. And they can go fuck themselves. Excuse my French, let's say a bit angry, but I think the F-worded action will be performed on us first, and it will be painful. Thank you for your attention. This was Branko Malic from Tribune signing out.